Good morning, everybody. I am running about 3 hours behind today, but that's okay. I'm Melissa Nielsen with Waldorf Essentials, and welcome to our Monday video. Excuse me, happy Martin Luther King Day. For those that are preparing some things to do with their children for that. Remember, keep it on the easy unless they're big kids. Today I thought I would talk about what to sort of do when your 5-year-old brings you this beautifully written piece of paper that they've spent, all this time on, and you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? They're writing and they're reading. And then, so I want to sort of, because I know I've talked about this before, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit more in depth and sort of talk about what's okay to do and what's not okay to do and how you navigate that. So first of all, let's start by saying a child that naturally comes to reading and writing, that means they just picked up a book and started reading. That doesn't mean you said, oh, well, I'll just go get 100 easy lessons to read from the library. That's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. We're talking about children that just decide, hey, I'm cracking this code, and they're 5. And that happens. That happens. My oldest was reading super early, and kids, that happens. But that's not generally an invitation in Waldorf terms. It's not an invitation to go, well, let's speed through and let's get busy and let's start first grade. And that's not what that means, because we have to remember with Waldorf, we're talking about age-appropriate material at the right time. We're also talking about, Waldorf sort of gets a weird bad rap about delayed academics, and it's not really even about that. So it's, a lot of people say to me, well, Waldorf, those kids, they don't learn to read until they're in 3rd grade. And I go, whoa, back up the truck. Actually, that's not necessarily true. In the school model, I think they probably are learning to read a little bit later than they do at home, only because you've got a big classroom full of kids. And at home, it's you and your child one-on-one. So I'm not really going to talk about 1st grade reading because we've done videos on that. What I'm talking about is sort of how do you support a child that is reading and writing and you're nowhere near 1st grade, because that happens. So, like my 5-year-old, she will be 6 in April. And the other day, and she does this often, she sat for a good 40 minutes and copied, big long copy piece. And it was right. Like, often she's writing them backwards, and I don't fuss. Because it all sorts itself out. And she brought it to me. She was super proud. Now, as a mom, you don't go, dang it, you did that? You smile and you go, that's beautiful work. And you don't say, show me some more. You don't do that. You support them and you say, that's beautiful work. And you sort of, because they spent time on it. And to them, because these letters are still, they're super archaic to them. They're not, especially the English, like the modern language is not pictorial. It's very, very much, abstract. So to them, they're just drawing pictures. In their head, they're not making connections yet, generally. They see us writing, and so they want us to be proud of them. So they're writing, and they're copying us, and they're doing the things that they think that big people do. And so, they see, especially like in our house, we've got 5 kids, so our younger ones are always seeing somebody else do copy work or writing their main lessons or something like that. They see me write lists, and so they want to do it. That's why if you're on your phone a lot doing this, they want to do this. That's what the attraction is. It's because they're in a very imitative state. So that's all that is. That is all those, those handwritten notes are. And they're having this feeling of accomplishment. And that's okay, because they're really in this space of it's steps to get to 1st grade. So it's natural for them to be sort of sorting out what letters are. Now, Sarai, so I have this necklace and it says OB for Ocean Beach, which is where we live. I'm sort of in love with where we live. So Soraya still she'll say, tell me about those numbers on your necklace. She doesn't know that there's a difference between numbers and letters. She's 5. And I don't correct her. And I don't say those aren't numbers. I just say this one is an O and this one is a B. And that's all I say. And actually this one is a peace sign. So that's what she knows this one as. So really and truly, we give them we tend to give them way too much information. And so I've been at this a long time, and so I think that sharing with you what's appropriate to give would be a good thing. It would be, especially for those of you that are, this is your first child, and you've sort of decided, well, I'm going to be on this Waldorf track, and oh no, my kid's starting to read. It's okay. All of the stuff that sort of happens before you start first grade is really pre-reading stuff, and it's okay. So it's okay for them to be writing. It's definitely not something you want them to be doing all day. You definitely want to sort of go, this is great, I'm glad you had fun with that, let's go outside and play now, and sort of balance that out. And I'm going to say that's especially important if you've got one that's decoded reading. If you've got one that's decoded reading and all they're wanting to do is sit in front of a book, you got to get them outside. You got to get them and that's not to say you're not going to allow them to read. It just means that you just want to balance that, because one of the things that I know, now keep in mind my oldest is also on the spectrum, but one of the things that was very apparent was because he was so in his head, he was not in his body. So we really want to be very careful about them being so much in their head. They see us be so much in our head, and so this should be a lesson for you to sort of get out of your head a lot. So we're going to be encouraging doing things with your hands, like knitting, handwork. And we did a video a couple of weeks ago on handwork for preschoolers. So that's incredibly important and valuable to be doing when they're sort of sorting out these new pre-reading and pre-writing skills. And definitely lots of big movement. So you're running and jumping. So we're in Southern California, and we have this crazy amount of rain right now. It's sort of driving me crazy. I know we really need it, but I'm this happy, sanguine, choleric person who really needs the sunshine. So when the sun's out, I'm like, yay! But my 5-year-old really needs to stomp in puddles. So I bought myself, I'm so excited. I'll put a picture of them on Facebook when I get them. They're coming, I think today, from Amazon. They are a pair of go to my knees wellies, sloshing boots, because I need to be out there with her. She's not going to get all of the full body movement by herself. And I really can't stand the rain. So I have to figure out a way to make the rain okay for me. So for me, it was buying a cute pair of $50 rain boots that have bumblebees on them. And I got myself a really cheap $8 rain poncho. So I'm going to be out there with her. I'm going to bundle all up so I'm not cold, and bundle her all up. And we're going to be out there in the rain stomping, because she's got unicorn rain boots and a unicorn raincoat. So she's already out there stomping. So really, I want you to think about big movements, stomping in puddles, running, especially if you're having a hard time with them sleep-wise, and they are sort of doing this in their head thing, and they're of this age group especially. I want you to go, you know what, this is an invitation for me to get out there with them. So last night after dinner, 6:30, way too early for us to, a good 30, 45 minutes too early for us to sort of scooch them into bed. But Soraya's already in her PJs, and I said, put on your shoes, going for a walk. So we went for this walk, and it was big body movement, and I would say, can you run from here to the stop sign and then wait for me? And so we do a lot of that, a lot of sprinting kind of stuff. And we came home, and I read their little chapter in the book that we're reading, and she went right to sleep. And so that's what you want. You really want them to be really worn out. And I was tired. I could have been like, you know what? I just want to sit in this chair and knit. Well, can't y'all just do something quiet? No, that's not going to get her to sleep, because in reality, that's going to make it take longer. Now, what do we do? Because it's January right now as I'm recording this, and most of this country is somehow either soggy or frozen. So what do you do when it's that cold? Well, when we lived on Hoth, or southeastern Idaho, because that's what it felt like. So we lived in Sugar City, which is it's just down from the Tetons, and it was very cold there in January. Very, very cold. I bundled them up. They had wool unders, then they had another layer, and then they had another layer, and then they had a coat, hats, and they were out in the snow digging snow caves. We had big boys and little kids at the same time, so they were digging snow caves, and they were building snowmen and doing all of these things that they can do in the frozen tundra. and really having a good time and using a lot of full-bodied motion and full-bodied movement. So the winter time for us when we lived there actually was just as easy to put them to bed as the summer was, because they were out there in it for hours on end. And so if you're in a spot where it's really cold, and I know cold, I mean, in southeast Idaho, the entire month of January is less than freezing, and like right now it's like in the negatives. We still spent some time outside every day. And the reason why you can utilize your body and it still makes you exhausted even if you're only out there for 10 minutes is because your body's having to work to stay warm. And so you're getting work in. So just make sure that you're spending some time out there and really utilizing the the gift that you sort of have of nature. So if you're in a spot that's really rainy, like I said, get rain gear. Everybody in our house just about, I'm like the last one to get rain gear because I'm like, I'm not going out there, but now I am, because I know she needs it. And I've resisted thinking that we moved to San Diego because there's 300 days of sunshine, and I swear all 65 days that are rain are right now. And we've not had that before in the last few years that we've been here. So got my rain gear because I'm getting out there with her. I can't wait for everybody else to do it. And I can't wait for there to be time when I'm going to feel okay with it. So I've got the rain gear. So you've got to be behind sort of doing that big full-bodied motion and full-bodied movement. So that, I think, is a huge component of this whole like learning to read and write thing early. So if you've got them really busy, then you're balancing that out. So if you've got a child, and this happens to me a lot, I get a lot of emails from moms that say, my 5-year-old is begging to read. Begging. And I feel so terrible because my mother-in-law just doesn't understand why I won't just teach her to read. And so you got to back that up, because again, there are so many things that go into reading. So many things that go into this literacy thing. And one of the things that I notice about a lot of kids from a public school or even mainstream homeschool setting versus what I see with Waldorf kids is they may be reading early over here, but fluency of reading comprehension, all of those things seem to come easier to kids with the Waldorf model. And why is that? Well, a lot of it is because we take our time and we recall after they've slept on a story, we recall. And I do that no matter what it is that we're doing from the time that they're really little. I go, remember that story we did yesterday? Talk to me about that story. It was a good story. Was it about a frog? Oh, you're right. It was about a turtle. So, I start asking those questions when they are like really little, and we start going through and just sort of doing this recall thing. All of those pieces are reading literacy, all of them. So like the stories that we do in kindergarten, the next day we recall and we'll draw about it or we'll act it out. Like right now, and I'm getting ready to do a blog post about this, my kids are enjoying the chapter book by Thornton Burgess about the seashore. And because we live 3 blocks from the beach and the tide pools are something that we're at all the time. And I wanted a way to be able to bring it to them without it being too heady. So I wanted them to be like, oh, that's a hermit crab. Let's go find one. And so his book is really good for doing that. It's really good for bringing science to kids in a very story-like way, and it doesn't put them too much in their head. We don't spend, my 10-year-old spending time like doing a little bit of classification. But my 5-year-old's just having a really good time looking at animals and see animals in the tide pools when we go. And she'll go, oh, that's in the Danny Meadow Mouse book. And she gets really excited about that. So that's how you sort of bridge that gap about academic science versus storytelling science. Use books like that. Thornton Burgess is an amazing storyteller, and he has a lot of books about animals, some of them seaside. I was really excited about those just because that's where we live, but he's got, like, the grade 2 curriculum is full of Thornton Burgess stories, but they're also super appropriate for the younger set. Super appropriate. So, like, I can remember when Sam was Soraya's age and Ellie was reading the Thornton Burgess stories to Sam during the day, like as her reading practice, because they're simple, sweet stories. So, excuse me. So again, all of that stuff is like, that's on your road to reading. So that's what I tell my kids. I know you want to read, but we're doing all of these things to get you ready for the actual reading part. And if we skip these things, then reading won't be as much fun. So we're going to do all of these things first, and then when we're in first grade, then we'll do the letters. So I also do We do some flute stuff in the kindergarten years. Not a ton, like one note stuff. So we were fortunate enough to get some a used nice flute, and we have a couple of new ones. So my older child and I have the new one, and we gave the 5-year-old this great one. It's the same flute, but it was used on the Waldorf tag sale for like half the money. So keep your eyes out for things like that. And she can go around and she can play one note because her fingers are big enough to hold that bottom hole and one of the top holes. And so we do things like that, just one note. And we might sing a song about that one note. So all of those pieces are reading literacy. My oldest daughter, when she was 5, she was also in the please, she's begging me to learn to read. She had my ex-husband up her grill, and she had her bigger brothers that were doing all this school stuff. She really wanted to learn to read. So we learned, she taught herself to read music. And that just came from us doing one note at a time. And then her wanting to know what this sound means on the paper. And when she was six or so, I helped her correlate the sounds to the paper, which is something that they usually don't do until about 3rd grade. But we're at home, we can do things a little bit differently because we're doing that one-on-one and we're keeping it very lively, and we are stepping back and not pushing. So again, if your child is begging to read, or you're like all excited because you went to get 100 easy lessons to read, just back up, because that's not them unfolding. Them unfolding is them decoding it on their own, or them writing and having a good time writing. Let them have fun with it. Don't try to rush with the don't try to rush with early stuff. So let's see, I'm going to answer a question here. My 6.5-year-old is totally wanting to read. Well, your 6.5-year-old is just about on the cusp of getting ready to read. So if you are you doing 1st grade, Bridget? Or are you still finishing up kindergarten? You can tell me, or you can tell me, I'll just answer sort of in general. If you're a 6.5-year-old and you're doing 1st grade and your guys are about to, my guess is you're still doing kindergarten. So there's sort of a gray area in there. That's going to happen. So I really wish that everybody would stop having babies in April and May. But that's myself there too, because I have an April baby. So April and May are really, really, really hard months as far as like getting them properly placed. Because really, if for placement, they really need to be 7 or almost 7 for 1st grade. And if you're having a baby, if you're doing 1st grade and your child is not 7 until April or May, then you are missing the entire school year and you're going to be off the whole way. Now, I know that there are other Waldorf people that are going to say, oh no, you're fine. And you know what? Read Steiner. Steiner is really pretty like pointed about it. And I will tell you, I tried to push my my oldest, because I was new to I wasn't new to Waldorf, but I thought, well, I know my kid better than anybody else. I'm just going to push. And this was a lot of years ago, before I was doing this sort of thing. And I had the biggest aha moment when I was pushing and he was then crying. and like not enjoying, and I wasn't enjoying, and we were at odds, and he was not ready. So I backed off and we spent a lot more time playing. So really what I would suggest is, if you've got a child that has got that April, May thing, then maybe start music, or start on your birthday. If you are committed to homeschooling, you really could start whenever you want. And so a lot of parents will do a half year. So they will do kindergarten until December and then pick up 1st grade from December to May. And so that's entirely appropriate. So I have my last 2 that are getting ready, or that are going through. Sam is a June birthday, and so he started 1st grade when he was 7 and 3 months. Soraya is an April birthday, but she's also a preemie. So she will start 1st grade when she's 7 and 5 months. And I feel pretty confident about that. She may be reading by then, and that's okay, but she still needs that time of simple stuff, of running, of playing, before she'll be really ready to do seat work. And it may be that we'll get to December before she turns 7, and I'll be feeling like, it's okay for us to start now, and maybe we will. It's kind of hard to tell, because I think when somebody emails me when their child is 5 and asks me all these questions, I'm like, Really? I can't answer that right now. Sorry, there's a garbage truck right outside my office window. So it's kind of loud. But I would say don't make those decisions until you're there. If you've got a child that's, that's got an April or May birthday and you're in January, February, and you're feeling like they're ready, then start. But that means you got to be consistent, especially, actually all the way through. You really got to be consistent. So now people say to me, well, what's going to happen then if I decide, or if the horrible thing happens, they have to go to first or they have to go to public school? And I go, nothing, because when they get to public school, they're going to place them based on something totally different, and you're going to have to be okay with that, because obviously you're not like rushing to push them into public school. It will sort itself out, and to think that it won't sort itself out is really stressing yourself out for things that you don't need to stress yourself out about. So really and truly, just relax. So somebody, let's see, Jody says, my daughter is 6 and we're doing first grade, but she gets super bored if she does things she already knows, so we move at her pace. So my question when people say that to me is, well, first grade is going to be boring to them. It's not going to be boring. Here's why. And this is the question that I ask moms. Are you painting wet on wet watercolor? Are you drawing with block crayons and teaching those lessons? Are you teaching modeling? Are you teaching music? Are you moving your body? Are you practicing reading every day? Are you doing all of those things? Because if you're not doing all of those things, then there's no way you can talk about them being bored or them not being ready or them being over ready or all of those things, because those are all pieces. First grade is much more than just reading. First grade is all of those other things. So if you're not doing like teaching instruction, then you're really not doing everything that you can be doing to fulfill first grade. So really sort of step back and look at that and decide, hey, maybe there's some things here I can pick up, because, and I also tell my kids, there's no boredom. It's just called, you're going to really work to make this picture better. And really work on, let's go paint, or let's do some modeling. We haven't played the flute yet. How are you at handwork? There's so many pieces that go into the curriculum that a properly placed child is not going to be bored. And when you get pushed back, often it's a temperament thing. So you have to sort of step back and look at the temperaments, your own and where you're coming from, as well as theirs. And one of the beauties of waiting for first grade until they're closer to 7 is you don't have this going on that happens with the 6-year change. And so I really like to let that sort itself out in kindergarten. And then you're really ready. That's sort of like this rite of passage and ready to go. So I really see, when you're working the curriculum at home, I really see children that are in first grade. If you're working our curriculum, they're probably about ready to read now for first grade, because you've got through almost all the letter introductions, I think, by now, if I'm remembering right. And you're really working on reading. And then you're working on that every single day. And even beyond when they're reading on their own, you're doing reading practice with them every single day. Let's see, we did it, and he did it. Yeah, I wouldn't, I'm reading comments here. I would just allow them to decode and allow them to really explore on their own. 2.5 is so young, and I am really careful. So, one of the things that my husband said to me, because my father-in-law has dyslexia, so he had my husband at like 4 and 5 like at the table, because he was really like nervous about my husband having dyslexia. And guess what, is too young to really tell, because they're still flipping their letters, because that's what they do. They're not super into their body yet, as far as it's time to be ready. So when we talk about Steiner and academics, you really got to take it to heart. You really don't want to push anything that is overly academic until they're ready. And I know you think they're ready. You go, but this is my kid. I think I know they're ready. So I say, step back, pray and meditate about it, get a consult if you need it. Look at all of the pieces. Have you done everything you can possibly do in kindergarten? Did you start introducing some music? Are they finger knitting, hand knitting, spool knitting, doing lacing cards, doing some? Are they doing all of those other pieces? Are you getting enough movement? and really, really working in there. And I really think you really have to, if you're sold on this path and you're sold on what you see from Waldorf Kids, and you're sold on the sort of the trajectory that goes like the whole deal, then you got to step back and trust. And you have to be willing to trust. And I know that's a really hard thing for a lot of moms. They're like, well, yeah, I sort of might be kind of, and I go read Steiner because that will help. That will help a lot. It will help you sort of understand. So I would suggest Kingdom of Childhood. I would suggest Study of Man. There's a lot. And there's a great book by Roberto Trostley called Rhythms of Learning. And there's a couple of book studies going on about that right now. So Rhythms of Learning is a really good one because it helps you sort of understand the whys behind the hows. And I really think it's important to just sort of step back, because one of the things you want to be really careful about, and a lot of moms get really defensive about this, and so I'm just going to be really open about it because I've watched my own children, is you want to be really careful that because if you've got them in their head too early, you're stunting something else. And I remember reading that thinking, yeah, all right. But then, it sort of builds when somebody else says it. I remember having a Lay Leche League leader say to me, you never do something unless it's at the expense of something else. And I remember thinking, that sounds vaguely familiar. and putting those things together. And she had nothing to do with Steiner. But really and truly, when I was doing in the act of like pushing my son, he was suffering in other ways. His movement was all crazy. His coordination wasn't good. My son that was running, and my other son that was running and playing and jumping in puddles and doing all those things, he was riding a bike. But my oldest kid couldn't ride a bike. So there are things that are suffering, so you want to be very careful. So somebody says, my 5.5-year-old is already reading. We're doing kidney. She is figure knitting. Perhaps we need more movement because she does get a lot of outside movement. She reads a lot when I'm nursing the baby. And I think that's okay. So it's also about, moms say to me, so what do I get this kid to read? My child is 5 and they want to read The Hobbit. And I go, nuh-uh, don't do that. It's okay that they're reading. So continue to get books at the library that are picture books, and have them read picture books to you. Age-appropriate content. The hard thing is when you've got a 4 or 5-year-old that's reading chapter books, there's not a lot of chapter books that are appropriate for them to read yet, that they can really, truly understand. And that's what you want to stick with. You don't want to put them in their head even more, where they're trying to figure out what's going on in The Hobbit. You want to slow that back and simple, easy stuff. So I would continue with, authors that you love and that are picture book authors. And I would go to the library every week, twice a week if you've got a child that's like eating them up. But also encourage reading those books over and over and over again. That's one thing that we do. So on my work day, Eric always takes them to the library, and Soraya comes home with, we sort of have a 4-book limit, because if I didn't, seriously, all the library would be at my house. And it would all be in Soraya's backpack. So, and with her, she'll pick up a chapter book just because she likes the cover of it, and so it won't be age appropriate, and so we have this rule that there can only be one of those, and everything else has to be a picture book. And so she'll bring those picture books home, and she will go over them over and over and over again, and she now sort of gravitates towards books that are like the subjects we're reading. Like we went whale watching 2 weeks ago, and then we're reading this book about the seashore, and she brought home a bunch of picture books about whales this week, and they were like storybooks. So, and she's like eating up all of the sleepy time sparkle stories about the ocean. So, really learning how to sort of pull all of those things together. And that means that I have to be in a spot of like suggesting and going, this one looks really good. Oh, I know you think you want to take that home, but we're not going to take that home today. Maybe when you're 7, we can take that home, but today we're going to take home this one. Which one would you like? This one or this one? Don't give too many choices. Don't allow things that you're not comfortable with. Remember that you're the mom. Remember that you're in charge of things. Remember that you're the one that's responsible for that library card, and ultimately in the end, and sort of hold your ground and be firm in it. So I'm going to read some more comments here. I did scale back on what she's reading. I think it's yeah. So there are some things I would say, if your child is under 7 and reading like gung ho, I would say Frog and Toad. There's a lot of those. Mouse Soup. Franklin, Little Bear, Um, there's some Waldorf ones too that would be okay. There's the Hay for My Ox one. Those are ones that we actually do at the end of first grade and into second grade anyway. Do you find boys and girls learn to read differently? I think temperament plays, like if I look at my 5 kids, temperament has played a bigger role than sex. And so I think about my daughter that's now, she's gonna be 16 the day after tomorrow. Holy crap, I don't know what happened. It's really crazy. Anyway, so she was kind of a slower reader, but not really slow. I mean, she was in second grade when she finally decoded it, but she's also incredibly sanguine. So it was for her, it was definitely like, you gotta slow down. You know, once we could get her to slow down and go through and get through all the letters and get through all because it just really was a matter of her like la 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 la. She's called her Smurfette for a long time because it was very much like that's where she lived. Samuel, who is 10 and very phlegmatic, and I would say I kind of can't put Harry in, even though he's really phlegmatic. He's my oldest. He read early because he has autism, so he was like, I'm gonna do it. Him, it was more like a decode. So Samuel was slower but determined. Like he really wanted to. It was slower as in that it like okay, so it took us a while through first grade. We got through all the letters. He had them down. He was very methodical, but it wasn't until he was into second grade, or maybe it was summer between first and second, something like that. No, it seems like he was into second grade, and he had it in his head that he wanted to read this big Star Wars book. And I was like, all right, but buddy, we're looking at like, you know, these Jan Cat Sat on a Mat books, and you're wanting to read this. So there's like space that has to happen here. So what has to happen? And so at that point, then he was like, oh, okay, so I really want to read this book, which he actually never ended up reading, but he read a whole bunch of other stuff. And he had to push himself to it. So we got through all of those early Waldorf readers. And then we moved on to Hay for My Ox and Little Bear and all of those other ones. And then, you know, by the end of second grade, he was flying. And he's midway through fourth grade now and obviously can read anything. He's a really strong reader. And but I do think that phlegmatics, they are very methodical about it. So if you get one that is, if you've got a child that's perfectionist and frustrated, sorry, garbage truck again. Seriously? That's why I do my videos at 6 in the morning, usually. So anyways, if you've got ones that are sort of getting perfectionists and struggling, just get them to slow down. You know, I do a lot of essential oils during school and really just get them to slow down and get them to be in a calm space. So my phlegmatic 8-year-old is hard to motivate. Well, I would say let's go to the library and find something you really want to read. Or, you know, find a way to, phlegmatics do pretty good with incentives. So if they really want to do something, then they'll do it. What do you think I should do? You started with numbers and then your child started adding and subtracting. You know, math is different. Math is different. So Steiner said math belonged to the gods. And I happen to really like that. That feels like a very strong truth to me. And so if they're adding, and as long as they're not spending crazy amounts of time computing, because I know that can really happen. You know, like again, my oldest that's on the spectrum, he could sit in math land all day, and he'd be like, "Look at this cool thing and I'm like, dude, not everybody thinks that way." So I would definitely make sure it's balanced, but it's all right if they're adding and subtracting. You know, sorting is part of that process that then leads itself to reading eventually. So allowing that sorting process to happen is an okay thing. So my youngest, she's 5.5, and she's got SPD and she's got some OCD stuff going. So she will sort and so I had to she'll sort for hours. So I have to make sure it's like a appropriate, not frantic thing. And if it's getting too frantic, then I have to start to pull her back from it, and we have to go do something active. So a lot of kids sort of naturally come to sorting. So just watch it. Keep an eye on it. You know if it's like frantic and not right. So If it doesn't feel right, then you have to do something else. So I'm going to look at the rest of your comment here. Adding and subtracting by yourself while she was drawing pictures. I think that's okay. I think it's just, I would feel it out. And also, again, don't be so stressed out about that part of it. So many parents like see this as an opportunity to rush forward. And so that's when you say to yourself, okay, I'm a homeschooler, but I'm not one of those homeschoolers that pushes forward as fast as we can. Because there is a whole segment of homeschoolers that they homeschool because they don't think the public school is doing it fast enough. So they homeschool so that their 4-year-old can read. And that's not what Waldorf is all about. So I think a lot of these things that happen sort of between 5 and 7 are really going to test whether or not you're really on board with Waldorf method. They're really going to test whether or not you're like okay with it. And so you just have to get really good at deflecting comments, and I would say things like, he's got the rest of his life to read. He doesn't have the rest of his life to play. So I'm going to let him play for another year. And then we're going to worry about reading. And those are the things that I told people. So when you've got then this child that's sort of out of the norm, I had to be my child's advocate on a regular basis. I had to make sure that Sunday school teachers knew that they weren't reading. In fact, I would do this up until they were reading. Every year my kids get a new Sunday school teacher. And so I would go and meet that teacher, would introduce myself, usually it's somebody I know because we're in the same congregation, but I would say, so I know you've got Sam in your class this year, and I just want to let you know where he's at with reading so that you don't call on him. And I will come back and let you know when he is fluently reading so you can call on him for anything. So right now it would be really great if you'd ask him to do the opening prayer and you'd ask him to help you with the chalkboard. Just please don't ask him to read any scriptures out loud yet. And I would do the same. I did the same thing with all of my kids, with whatever level they were at. I was constantly in contact with their teachers, and those teachers really appreciated it because a lot of parents are just like, go to class, and they're not having that interaction. But the teachers that we had were always appreciative. And when I was teaching those classes, I was super appreciative. I was super appreciative when a parent would come to me and say, it would be really great if you didn't let them have any junk. And I was like the non-junk teacher anyway. I'm like, duh, we're just going to have some cheese and crackers. You have a problem with that? So I was really always appreciating it. And I think that most teachers really appreciate that when you are interacting. Another thing came up here recently with, our kids go to karate and they love it. All of them do. And the karate instructor, the guy that owns the dojo, is a really close family friend of ours. He's also a 37-year-old man who's never been married and has no children. So when he's got Soraya's class and he's telling her, I need you to do 20 jumping jacks. And she looks at him and I shout from across the room, Jerry, she can't count. Oh, okay, Soraya, I'm going to count for you. So, you might have to sort of like educate some of the teachers, or he'll do in other classes, who knows the capital of, and I'm like, Jerry, he's like, oh yeah, I think I better ask Melissa whether or not these kids probably know this stuff yet. Because he doesn't have any kids. And so we're really close friends, and so we can do that. But it's really good if you can get to know the teachers that your kids have so that your kids aren't put in a situation of feeling really silly or, and the one time that I didn't say something to a teacher, and it wasn't even a teacher, it was somebody that Eleanor was getting a ride with. And it was somebody from church and somebody well-meaning, but it was somebody she was getting a ride with to some event. She came home and she was like, why don't I know algebra? And she was like in 5th grade. And I'm like, because you're in 5th grade? And she was like really sort of confused. And so then I sat down and I said, well, a lot of kids in public school do things this way. And my guess is that kid, even though they think they know algebra or they're in a pre-algebra class in 5th grade, it's not really what they're doing. They're not doing much things that are different than what you're doing. So, really sort of helping them understand. Somebody says, my daughter is sanguine, will be 7 in 2 weeks, and is not interested in learning. Do I just go with that? I would be, yes. I don't think it's a worrisome thing, but I would start really working on, are you doing 1st grade with her, Dasha? I hope I'm saying that right. If you're doing 1st grade with her, then I would really be like, okay, well, we're going to at least have some sort of instruction. Maybe you're starting with painting instruction. or drawing instruction. My second son would not have anything to do with any of the letters until he was 7. So I can remember very clearly he would listen to the stories, and we would draw and we would paint and we would do handwork and we would do music, and he loved that. But if I started talking to him about the sounds of letters, he was like, lady, no. So I sort of just let him go. It's just kind of amazing because my ex-husband was really kind of weird about that, but just kind of let him go. And then right around the time he was 7, and it may have been right after he was 7, we lived close enough to church that we could walk home. And he turns to my husband. He says, my mom won't teach me how to read. My husband looks at me. He goes, and he looks at my son, who was his stepson, and said, oh, yes, she will. And we went home and he read like in 2 days because it was all there, and he had been absorbing it and he had been collecting it, and then he took off reading. So I wouldn't worry a ton, but I would absolutely make sure that that you're sort of planting those seeds of doing learning. You're saying your daughter loves painting, knitting, modeling, do all of those things. Tell the stories. She needs the fairy tales. Okay, I'm going to go up here a little bit. Katie says, we tell people that we think my 6-year-old can read, but we are waiting to formally teach it when it falls into our curriculum. I think that's a perfect thing to say. Perfect thing to say. She usually interjects with, I learned about squares and diamonds with, oh, wait, go back. Sorry, got a new phone and I'm trying to figure all this out. With Elsa. That's funny. Yeah, I think that's hilarious. So I usually, my kids have gotten really good, and part of it is because I'm fairly confident, and so I think that depending on where you are in your homeschooling, I tell people often, especially if you were a breastfeeding mom or a home birthing mom, or that was really important to you, and you did all these already alternative things, you wouldn't let somebody talk you into weaning early. So why would this be any different? And so I really just sort of, my kids have gotten really good at saying, well, I'm not ready for that yet. So next, please. And if you can really instill that confidence in them, it's super helpful. Super, super helpful. So I'm going to sort of make sure I didn't miss any comments. Yeah, Dasha, you're saying just not the academics so much. I would just, like I said, I would do the stories. I would do all the things that you're doing. And then I would bet that in the next little bit, you're going to see it. Or, you might say, gosh, or she'll be in a situation or somebody's going to talk to her about reading. And then she'll be ready. She'll be ready. Like I said, for my son, it was, we had the hymn book out at church, and we were singing. And my husband sort of does this funny thing. If you don't know the words to the song, you can sing peas and corn to the tune instead, like peas and corn every day kind of thing. And which is not entirely reverent, but I sort of step back on that part. So when they get tired of singing that and they actually want to know what's in the hymn book, then that's when my son was like, oh, wait, maybe I should learn how to read. I need to know this stuff. Then I don't have to sing peas and corn anymore, and it's sort of, then it builds. And so sometimes it takes them being in a situation like that. But I wouldn't stress so much. I would just lay the seeds, lay the foundations, do the stories, do all of the other things that you're doing, and just keep going. So hopefully I've gotten through what will help a lot of you with regards to this early thing, and not being stressed out. If you've got a 5-year-old that comes to you with this long letter that they've written or copy work that they've done, that's normal. They see you doing it all the time, so they, want to emulate what you're doing. So be okay with that. Soraya can write her name, but not by memory. So she has her sister painted something for her with her name on it. So she'll go and sit at her desk and copy what she wrote or what's painted there. So some kids have got their names memorized. That's totally okay. I think that wherever you are, be there, but don't push. Don't push, and don't allow others around you to push. One of the things that is really important is that we have stewardship over these little people. And in having stewardship over them, we sort of need to really be able to protect this space. So again, if you are really sold on this method of education and this is what you're wanting to do, then stand up for it when you need to and just say, you know what, we're not there yet. And if you're having struggles, maybe your husband is really struggling, then I would say, well, will you read when I'm reading? Will you listen to some of these videos? Show him this video, send him to our website, do those sorts of things that, help educate him. Because obviously, and not obviously, but a lot of times a no is a request for more information. And maybe, if dad's got a 9 to 5 job that he's going to every day, and he's got all these people around him that are asking him all these questions. Was your kid reading yet? Dads do the comparison thing way more than moms do usually. And so, give him an opportunity to go, well, no, but my kid's playing the flute really good. How's your kid doing at the flute? Or give him the tools that he can answer those questions. So Bridget asked, what about last names? You know what? My last name is Nielsen. Sama couldn't spell Nielsen until he was in 2nd grade. So it's okay. I would just worry about first names. And then again, I really wouldn't worry about it until 1st grade. And unless they're asking, unless there's a situation where, gosh, you gotta like make your kid, I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. I would make sure all the teachers know who your child is so that they can write your child's name on there. And I would even say, he's not writing yet. Could you please just make sure you write his name on his paper? Because remember, writing should come before reading. So it's okay if you're seeing this like writing stuff that they're doing, that's good. They're starting to make those connections, even though they don't really know what those letters mean yet. They will start to make those connections between that and reading. It's coming. It's part of that pre-reading skill. So you want them to be writing before reading anyway. So if you've got a child that's been reading, give them the space to do a lot of drawing, a lot of painting, a lot of modeling, a lot of space to sort of bring all of those things together, head, heart, hands, and really be able to then, be on that path for healthy reading and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of movement. And on that note, I'm going to go upstairs, eat my breakfast, and go on a walk. So hope y'all have a great day. Bye now.